Hey everybody, welcome to the realm. I'm Brian.
I'm Rich. How's everybody doing tonight?
I'm Jen.
I'm Rob.
We got a cool show tonight. This is one that I know I've kind of had circled. Um, this is a rabbit hole that people tend to go down once you start it. It's a deep one. We're getting into DB Cooper. We're gonna do. I'm gonna give
Dan
kind of the
Cooper for
broad
the
strokes.
layperson.
What's that?
Dan Cooper for the layperson.
Dan Cooper for the layperson.
Because as you're going to tell us, DB Cooper is not a real person, right? You're going to tell us that?
That's true. That's absolutely right. So yeah, we'll give a little overview for anybody who doesn't know the story, and then there's some specifics of maybe some possible people that have been overlooked. Right away, I'll let everybody know a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be referencing comes from a really great show. You can find it on YouTube. The History Channel has it up on YouTube for free, the whole series. It's Brad Meltzer Decoded, Unsolved Mystery of DB Cooper. So if you go onto YouTube, search for Brad Meltzer Decoded, you'll be able to find the episode about DB Cooper. It's a really good watch. And then there's also Expedition Unknown, Season 4, Episode 7. They kind of go through.
There's actually two of them.
Yeah, there's one in a later season too.
Yeah, we hit both of those yesterday.
Okay.
And we watched both of those first, and then we hit the Meltzer one.
Okay.
And it was amazing that one there, how it was approached and everything they had, how it kind of made me almost forget about the first two things I watched. It was very intriguing to me, and it kind of, like you said, it's like a rabbit hole. It sucked me right in with the tractor beam. It was amazing, but we felt, because Jenny didn't know much about the whole DB Cooper thing. Okay. So I told her, I said, let's sit down, let's watch it. I said, I know for sure that there's some Expedition Unknown episodes. I said, because that's where I watched some of it. I said, let's watch a couple of those. So we watched those, and then she said, well, let's watch that other one. So we watched the other one, and by far out of the three that we watched, that one was the most interesting one. So I'm glad that you were able to give us that as a reference of what you're going to be basing your discussion on, because my thought is, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you would have said watch Expedition Unknown, this whole conversation we're going to have would be going in a different direction.
I kind of agree with that neither one of the Expedition Unknown episodes, I felt in the second one, they really tried to get into maybe some specific suspects, but I thought that the guy on the Brad Meltzer episode, I really watched it because I wanted to see the photos they had out. He wasn't on there. And the reason why that guy... The reason why that guy was ruled out by the FBI is wild to me.
But let's get into that later, because I got thoughts on that. Yeah.
All right. So Rob, where do you come down? Are I'm assuming you've been down the DB Cooper rabbit hole. Oh, you're on mute, Rob.
You're on mute, Rob. Can't hear you.
You're on mute, Rob.
Rob.
No, I have no idea. I have no idea who he was until I got the email from the realm. I've never heard about it. And when I've looked around, I didn't find, most everything said he's dead. So that was a lot of what I find. I didn't really. I did not do proper homework at all, and everything that I found was kind of the same, and gave the same information, basically stating that he's probably dead, that he didn't make the drop because it was stormy out, and the terrain that he was going to land in was kind of uncharted. It was at night. They found the half of the money, and the other half was never found in circulation. So it was kind of like a lot of information was like, hey, it's cut and dry. Okay. I even tried to search DB Cooper conspiracy, and I didn't find a lot of stuff.
Okay. Well, this is going to be fun then. Maybe we can get
educate me.
Maybe get you thinking. Yeah, this is okay. All right, well, let's get into it. Just give the overview of the whole situation for anybody who doesn't know. So, DB Cooper is the only unsolved skyjacking in U.S. history. To this day, it's still unsolved. So, on an afternoon, the day before Thanksgiving in 1971, a guy calling himself Dan Cooper. It was later on that the media started attaching the DB, but the actual ticket says Dan Cooper. He boarded Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305 in Portland, going. He was going from Portland to. Was he going to
Seattle.
Seattle?
It was a Portland to Seattle flight. It was only a 30-minute flight, is what he bought the ticket for.
Yep.
And not to steal your thunder, but I'll interject. My
page got cut off, so
well,
I'm
good. You're good. And back in the 70s, there was no, airport security. There was none of this NTSB and any of that stuff. So, well, okay, there was NTSB. Sorry, I'm thinking of what's the one that checks the bags?
TSA.
TSA, that's the one. Sorry, there was no TSA. So, this case here single-handedly, not to steal your thunder, but this case pretty much single-handedly changed the way the airports take care of security and how much seriously they take it with X-ray and things like that. So this case here kind of basically shaped what we deal with today.
Yep.
I can't even imagine, because one of the shows that we were watching, they were explaining that they didn't even check your driver's license.
Yeah. You could have pretty much said whoever you wanted to be, and they would have never checked.
No metal detectors, no nothing. They just, okay, here you go.
Yep. So guy named Dan Cooper, he boards the plane. It's going from Portland to Seattle. While he's on that plane, he hands a note to one of the flight attendants. She kind of disregards it at first because there's a lot of businessmen on a lot of flights that are handing her notes. But this Dan Cooper calls her aside and says, "You want to read that note? I have a bomb." He opens up his briefcase that's next to him, and the stewardess would describe it looked like red sticks of dynamite and wires. So at that point, she notifies the flight crew that he says that he has a bomb. They get a hold of the airline, and they want to know what the demands are. And he had pretty specific demands. He said when they land in Seattle, he wanted $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, food for the crew before releasing all the passengers, and then have only 3 pilots and 1 flight attendant for the next part of the flight. He demanded to go to Mexico. So they say that they're going to, cave to his demands. They get the money together. They get the parachutes. They give them all that. They get all the passengers off of the plane. They leave Seattle. They have to make a stop in Reno to refuel. They can't make it from Seattle to Mexico where he wants to go. Why? Because he was real specific with what he told them he wanted. Just not the money and the parachutes. He also said he wanted the flight flown below 10,000 degrees because he knew that it wouldn't be pressurized at that altitude, and that the wing flaps, the things that go up and down when you're landing and taking off, he wanted those set at 15 degrees because at that degree of flap, the plane couldn't go any faster than 200 miles an hour. So with the plane in that configuration, they couldn't make it to Mexico. They had to refuel, so they were making a stop in Reno. 45 minutes after they leave Seattle,
stay under 10,000 feet, right?
Yep, he has to stay under 10,000 feet. So he was very specific with the aviation portion of what he wanted. He clearly knew. About 45 minutes after they took off from Seattle, he sent the flight attendant to the cockpit. Once she was in the cockpit and the pilots were there, they got the notice that the aft stairs. He boarded a Boeing 727. We'll back up with that. Now, this plane has a very specific reason why he would have chose it. Back in the 70s, a Boeing 727 was a very popular airplane to be used by a lot of airlines, and it had an aft staircase that can open and close. If anybody's ever seen the movie Zodiac, they board one of those planes, Robert Downey Jr. and Jake Gyllenhaal, and I always think, oh, that's a DB Cooper plane. So this plane had the ability at the back of the plane, stairs can be opened and closed, and that way when you're boarding, you can just board up and down the stairs. So fast forward to the flight attendant and all the pilots in the cockpit, they get the notice that those stairs have been lowered. So that means DB Cooper's plan now is coming into focus. He's going to jump out of the airplane using the back stairs. The pilots report feeling kind of a little tug on the stick up in the cockpit, that what they thought felt like a jump or just from the stairs, the change in the pressure. So that's where they said he jumped off. Was about 45 minutes into the flight. They land in Reno. No Dan Cooper on the plane. He's gone. So the search is in southern Washington in a very wooded area. That's where the search is, because that's where, according to the flight path, the pilots say he jumped. Nothing has ever been found. They found nothing. And it was the largest manhunt in the history of the United States. They found nothing. Not until 9 years later in 1980, just north of Portland on the Columbia River, a young boy was digging for a fire pit. He and his family were at the beach, and in the sand at a place called Tina Bar, he uncovered 3 bound bundles of money with the rubber bands still intact, but the bills were very deteriorated. So they called the police, and they found out that the serial numbers on that bundle of money matched the serial numbers on the DB Cooper money that was given to him, and that bundle totaled $5,800. So that's the only thing that's ever been found to this day for DB Cooper. Now, after getting kind of the overview, so that's the story. So to this day, it's never been found. No other money has ever been found except for the $5,800 on the beach. Take a sip of delicious non-alcoholic beer. So nice. That brings us to the Brad Meltzer Decoded episode. Now, this episode for this show focused on the group of investigators for that show who are looking into one specific possible suspect named Kenny Christensen. Now, Kenny Christensen, after his brother, when Kenny Christensen died, his brother got all of his personal effects, and his brother was kind of hip to the idea that he could have been DB Cooper. Now, Kenny Christensen was ruled out by the FBI as a possible suspect for 3 reasons. So the FBI ruled Kenny Christensen out as a possible suspect for 3 reasons. 1, he didn't fit the eyewitness descriptions. 2, he wasn't a career criminal. And 3, the FBI doesn't believe that the hijacker had any military training, and Kenny Christensen did have military training.
They have no clue. They have no clue. So that's the thing that baffles me about all of these.
Right.
Any of these suspects is they don't know. They know nothing. They know very little about this other than what these people told them. Yet they're good. Yet they can rule out. Oh, we're pretty sure he wasn't a military. How do you come up with that?
That's a bizarre one.
You know what I thought was more bizarre is that while he was shorter, they said the suspect was 5'11" to 6 something. He's 5'8" for Christ's sake. He could have had higher shoes on. I mean, why would you even say, well, he was too short? Okay, he's not 4'5". He's only a couple inches shorter than what you're saying.
Exactly.
But how do you know how tall he was? You don't have.
You're on an airplane. I would love to have. We also have to remember that the only facts we know about the case are the notes that he gave to the flight attendants and the specifics that he asked for on the plane.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is based off of the 3 pilots and the flight attendants.
Right.
That's where all of the sketches came from.
Yeah. They were all scared. So, I mean, you got to
Right.
put a little bit of fear into it. So you're not thinking straight. The guy had sunglasses on. So, and we've all been in an airplane, you know, at night, even if you have the little lights on, it's not real bright in there. So, I mean,
Exactly.
you're not seeing things as clear as you think you are.
Well, not
I
to
don't know.
mention, everybody's sitting down in the plane.
Yep.
And if you are standing up, you're hunched over or you're trying to duck
Yeah.
to, you know, it's rare when you're on a plane that you're actually standing upright where somebody would be able to say, oh, he's 5'8". You know, I mean, it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, where they come
They
up with
would
that
rule
stuff
him
is
out
just
because of
bizarre
the
to me. To the
height.
point that they can
Did
rule
they ever
people out.
do any handwriting analysis?
He took
No.
notes with him.
Nope. He took all the notes with him. He collected every
Oh.
note that he gave.
Okay.
He got it back. So the things that were on the note were again from just the eyewitness testimony of who interacted with him, because he was smart enough to take all of that back.
Yeah, he was definitely smart enough. I mean, to ask for the 4 parachutes instead of 2, figuring,
Yep.
you know, okay, well, we can't give them, you know, just in case they decide to give them, well, give us 2. Well, how do you know they're going to give you good parachutes? You know,
Well,
so you're going to give him 4, and he asked specifically for what kind of parachutes he wanted. He wanted 2 back ones and 2 for the front, you know, the reserve ones. And
Yep.
he specified what type he wanted. He knew he had to know something about it, about jumping out of planes or something, because I have no clue what the hell any of that is.
No, but
Parachute's
you
a
know, now that
parachute.
you said that, that is really smart, because if he asked for 4 of them, that implies that he's taken somebody with him.
Exactly. And they said he might have hostages that he's gonna, so we can't give him a fake one because we don't want to hurt the hostages.
exactly.
You know, so he thought about this really well when he did that. And I think I'm hoping you're going to get to some of the points, which I'm sure you're going to, that even the spot where he jumped is probably not where he jumped.
Exactly.
You know,
That's where
it's just, I think he knew enough to throw everybody off the whole trail. And
Yep.
just the fact that, like Rob said, nothing's ever been found. You could go down two of these rabbit holes. The one where he jumped and he didn't make it, or you can go down the one where he jumped and he did make it. And no matter
Yep.
which one you go, you could find facts or not facts, but I mean, you could find facts, you could find opinions for everything, or you can find little evidence trails that could lead you both ways, which
Yep.
is what makes this case intriguing, because nobody knows what happened. So you can come up with whatever you want until somebody finds the parachute, a skeleton or something like
Yep.
that. I mean, which they did. They did find a skeleton while they were searching originally, and it ended up being somebody that was kidnapped or something like that. They
Yep.
did, so something good came out of the search.
Yeah, exactly.
It didn't end well for that person, obviously, but they did find a person that was reported missing, that was abducted.
Yep. You know, I mean, it's when you think about the planning that he put into the whole operation, it would be one thing if it was pure speculation that I wonder if he told them to fly the plane lower because that's where it was. No. We know specifically he asked for very, very intentional instructions for the operation of the airplane, which means if you're that detail oriented for that, nobody plans half a crime. You plan from the beginning and to the end. You know who plans half a crime? The ones who get caught. And this person has never been caught. So you have to think that all of these things were thought through, which is why when the FBI does it, we don't think they had any military training. But here's the part about the parachutes. Of the 4 parachutes that were given to him, there were 3 newer models and then an older military style pack. He took the older military style pack. To me, that sounds like somebody who was more familiar with that specific pack.
Yeah, but they went
Instead
down the
of
path
taking
of,
a
he
newer
didn't
one.
know. They went down the path of, well, he didn't know because he didn't take the newer, better ones.
Which
What
is
difference
silly.
does it make? A
So
parachute's a parachute. If he's military, he's familiar with the military one.
right.
You think that
So-
there's that much of a difference between parachutes?
Yeah,
I'm
the
not sure.
military
I'm not
one.
an expert, But I'm just saying, is there that much of a difference?
Yeah, they said the military one is a little more bare bones. You can't control it. You know, when it opens up, and you're going wherever it goes, as opposed to a newer type one where you can control which direction you go and you kind of can guide yourself. So it's a little more rugged. It's a bigger pack. So, I mean, in the end, it all does the same thing. So hopefully it's gonna open and you're not gonna crash in the ground doing 10,000 miles an hour.
Well, you might have been concerned about tracers, maybe in the newer packs. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows?
I mean, the interesting part when you start taking the military pack and you start taking the specifics of that airline, that Northwest Orient Airlines, when we go to Kenny Christensen from the Brad Meltzer show, again, we found out why he was ruled out. He didn't fit the description. He wasn't a career criminal, and he had military experience. They don't think he did. So that's why he was ruled out. But here's what we do know about Kenny Christensen. We know that Kenny Christensen worked for over 20 years for Northwest Orient Airlines. We also know that Kenny Christensen was a paratrooper in the Army. He was in not just any paratrooping group. He was in a special branch of the paratroopers that they said 262 people enter that program, and it only takes 80. And he was one of the 80 people in that program of paratroopers. So now you're starting to build, if you have a Venn diagram of what you're looking at, we're starting to have some overlapping circles here between our friend Kenny and Dan Cooper.
I think if out of any of them too, I mean, they've had hundreds of suspects. To have hundreds of suspects, and every one of them you can go, nah, it's not him. Nah, not him for this. One of them's got it. I mean, how many possible suspects can you possibly have for a crime? And even ones that admitted they did it, which obviously they did. Those ones they didn't do it, but there was a lot that actually said voluntarily, "Oh, sure, I'm him. I did it." And then they were ruled out for certain things. But out of all of them, this was the only guy that worked for the freaking airline. Isn't that, you know, if there's a murder and it's a husband or a wife, who's the first suspect? You're not looking somewhere else. You're looking in-house. So if you're looking for a suspect, wouldn't you think maybe we should see if maybe somebody that worked there was involved? Maybe not. That blows my mind too.
well, when they were trying to establish motive, and you find out they talked to a historian for Northwest Orient Airlines, and he said that in those years they were called Cobra Airlines because they would strike so much. There was so many strikes that went on in that company that it was hard to make a living. Yep. So they were establishing that as a possible motive for Kenny. So now Kenny, he started out in Alaska just working as a jack of all trades at a depot there. Mm-hmm. But then he eventually got certified to be a flight attendant, and that's what he was doing at the time of when the skyjacking would have happened. Not only do we have some military background of being a jumper, he works for the airline, so would have some working knowledge of how it would work. 3, he makes a deposit a couple of weeks after the hijacking.
We'll go back a second. Go back a second first. Set that up a little bit. This is a guy that's making 15 or making, what was he making, like $500 a week?
$500 a month.
Yeah, I think it was like $120 a week or something.
He was making bringing home $500 a month, and the guy, nothing in his bank account, none of that stuff going on. He's living paycheck to paycheck, and that's why it was important what Brian said about the company striking so much, because it was impacting everybody's pockets. So it's a theory, but take that into consideration. $500 a month is what this guy's bringing home. Now, Brian, please continue with what you were going to say.
Well, no, I'm glad that you filled that part in to give it a little bit of color, because I did see what $512 a month in 1971 would be today.
And what is
it was like around $3,000 a month. So
I was just looking that up.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So that's what you're talking about if you're looking at today's dollars. Now, one of the interesting things when they talk to, because they do a great deal of talking to Kenny Christensen's brother, who kind of got all this material after Kenny passed.
Do you have still pictures from that show somewhere to put up?
I think I have let's see here.
There's a couple pictures that he had on that show that were very interesting to me, like the one where he's standing in the doorway holding the bag when he comes inside, when he comes in the door. And
I don't have that one. I'm trying to get. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
So
I think he looks like him. I think he looks like him.
But here's the wild thing with this picture. We put up a picture. Anybody can Google Kenny Christensen, DB Cooper, and you'll see the picture that we're showing. And it's a side by side of the sketch of DB Cooper and Kenny Christensen around the same time that this hijacking would have happened. And they have I like that they cut it off at the top of the forehead so you don't see DB Cooper's hair, because you can really see the resemblance. But in the picture of the actual sketch of DB Cooper, where you see the whole thing, he does have hair on the top of his head. Kenny is bald with a little hair on the side. Here's a picture. So there's Kenny. But the interesting thing that his brother says is that before the hijacking, Kenny always wore a toupee. After the hijacking, he never wore his toupee again. So when you look at the sketch of DB Cooper here, you throw a toupee onto Kenny, I can totally see that not being a mismatch on a dark plane at night with only a few witnesses telling us what they remember. So
say when we're talking about appearance,
yeah,
I know that in one of the shows they were talking about how he wore a black suit and he ordered a bourbon and Sprite or 7-Up or something, and that was a sophisticated drink in the 70s. And they had kind of this picture of a very, very professional businessman, but a lot of the eyewitnesses said no, he was in kind of just a normal suit. He wasn't in a real fancy suit, and he was much more of an average looking person versus that pristine businessman that
Don
was
Draper
portrayed. So even in that sense, it doesn't line up all the time to why people are discounted. But when you look at Kenny, he was just a normal guy. He didn't have lots of money. He was making a living and doing the best he could. It would be more, I would think, more realistic that it would be someone like that versus someone who was making a ton of money.
Yes.
I mean,
it's interesting also that not in the Meltzer episode, but one of the Destination Unknown ones, they said there was another witness on the plane that tried to give a statement, and they didn't want the statement. The FBI.
Oh, that's interesting.
He was a few seats ahead of it, and he was trying to give he wanted to give a statement as well because he had a different angle of it, and I think it was a lot different than what the statement was from the flight attendant, and they never even took his statement. Didn't even consider it. Which is probably why it wasn't in the Meltzer one either, but because
because they couldn't go off of it.
But it's interesting that they brought that up, and they said there was a guy, they said his name, the whole 9 yards, that he wanted to give his statement of what he interpreted or saw, and they didn't take it.
Right.
So
I mean, when you go off of the appearance, the appearance thing, because on the first episode of Destination Unknown, is they take the tie. The one thing that was left behind, which again, he was meticulous in collecting everything. He didn't take the cigarette butts because at the time we didn't have DNA testing. So why would he think about that? And they got thrown away.
What happened to those cigarette butts, by the way?
Well, they got thrown away somehow.
Oh yeah, they accidentally disappeared out of the Vegas crime lab.
Yes.
I wonder how that happened.
Interesting, right? So the one thing that was left was his clip-on tie was left there. It's when they studied it forensically, it's just like a clip-on tie from JCPenney. Josh Gates takes it to a lab where they have a new, I'm not exactly sure what type of microscope or whatever it was that they were using. It was some newer piece of equipment that could get such a more broad look at what particles are attached to a tie. Because they point out everybody wears a necktie all the time. If that's what you wear for work, you never wash it. So it's been everywhere you've been. So when they test this tie and they see all these new particles on the tie, and I think one of the big strange ones was some sort of element that was used in tube television sets. And that was kind of weird. But as we're watching this and they're talking about it, Danny makes the best point ever. He probably got all the clothes from a thrift store. Would that not be the smartest thing that you would do? So then when you start to hear the description that he wasn't dressed fancy, he was wearing kind of a godly 70s leisure suit type thing. Like when you start to put that together, I go, yeah, he probably got all this stuff from a thrift store. He probably left the tie on purpose to throw them off of something, or he could have been standing on the back of those stairs. It's a clip-on tie. The wind could have blew it off and it flew back in. I don't think he would have been stupid enough to leave the tie if it wasn't intentional, or it was just some sort of an accident.
Yeah, but like you pointed out, though, back then we didn't have all that testing even for cigarette butts. So I mean, even if you left the tie behind, I don't know that his thought would be to leave behind to throw him off, because he's probably not back then. You're not thinking, they're going to check it for DNA or for under a microscope for whatever. That's not.
To me, with the yet, you know, with the clip-on tie and the other descriptions that people would get into, that he wasn't very fancy at all, that does make me think more of our guy Kenny. If you just go into somewhere and get some secondhand suits or something to put on for this caper you're going to do, it's not going to look awesome. So I thought that was an interesting tidbit, that we did get some descriptions that kind of jibed with that idea. But Kenny joined the paratroopers. His brother says he joined the paratrooper branch, or whatever that unit is called, because they paid more. That's the only reason why he did it. So when you take that type of mentality that he may have and you throw in strikes and maybe having a little bit of animosity towards the airline, you do start to make that connection. And it was a few weeks after the hijacking, his account that had no money in it had a deposit of $186,000. $186,000, 276.14 is what he deposited into his account. Now the hijacker asked for $200,000. He also, a man of little means, after the hijacking, he lends $5,000 to his best friend's sister to buy a house. This is about 6 or 7 months after the hijacking, cash, by the way, and then uses $16,000 cash to buy himself a house. But the FBI ruled this person out. That's bizarre that they would rule him out.
Like I said, there's several things here that when you start talking about it, it baffles me as to how they cannot even consider this guy a suspect to dig into. Yep. I mean, it just blows my mind.
Yep. Kenny's brother said,
if I did that, man, people be all over me.
Oh yeah.
You know, this guy does it. Nah, he's not a suspect.
Why do you think they would be all over you, Rich?
Oh, because they know I don't have no money. I've got a sugar mama for that.
But Kenny's brother
Let's move on.
says Kenny drank bourbon. We know that Dan Cooper ordered a bourbon on the airplane. He wore a toupee before the hijacking, never wore it after the hijacking. And on his deathbed, on Kenny's deathbed, he said to his brother, he said, "There's something you should know." And then he stopped and he said, "But I can't tell you." And he never finished it. Never finished that thought. It's very interesting that Kenny was ruled out. It blows my mind. There was also, let me see, might have to cut part of this while I look at this. There was a reason. It was some corroborating things for Kenny. All right, I'll pick up here. So there was a lot of discussion on the Brad Meltzer show about if this is even possible that somebody could survive this, jumping out of a 727 at that altitude. So there was a lot of discussion about it, if it could be done. And I think the general consensus is yes, it could be done. In 1972, another suspect that was on the FBI's list, named Richard McCoy, he skyjacked United Airlines flight and demanded $500,000. He chose a Boeing 727. He jumped at 16,000 feet and at 200 miles an hour, and he lived. He was ruled out because I guess his alibi checked out, that he was at home having Thanksgiving dinner with his family when the Dan Cooper hijacking happened.
Yeah, like in Utah or something, way too far
Yep,
away.
Yep, in Utah, which made me think of Fletch. Airplanes, Utah, Provo. So that kind of proved that you could survive this, which here's where I start to.
So
what's that?
They had people test it out too on that show and on the other shows where they actually had tests. Had pilots run the same flight plan about where they think he jumped and where you're going to land, and everybody said it's very possible. Now, I don't know how survivable it would have been landing in the forest. I know there's been some debate about that, but then you're assuming that jump point is right is the thing. And the one thing that all the shows have and all the stories have is no one's actually really sure exactly if they're in the right spot looking anyway.
Yep.
So, because of how things are found, like that $5,800 where that was found, as opposed to some other theories that are out there. I think they start putting them all together. I think because on the other shows they have other suspects that are really kind of throwaways, except for maybe one or two that made me go, that doesn't sound like a coincidence either. But then once again, then you hear about this guy and you go, shit, it's this guy instead.
Yep.
Well,
yep.
So every story
D.B. Cooper is one of those things where that happens a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many suspects that it's almost like the secret treasure hunt. You could almost make things fit the way you want it to. And you have to abide by the same principles of that hunt, is that you have to, when you get things that discredit your point, you have to be able to give up on it. You can't keep shoehorning things. And I feel like D.B. Cooper goes down that same well with the possible suspects. The thing that makes Kenny so damn interesting is the large amount of money that he came into working for the airline. I just thought of this today. So they say in one of the Josh Gates episodes that he didn't pick the name Dan Cooper by accident. It's not just some random name. There is a Canadian comic book that was out at that time called Dan Cooper. And on the cover of the comic book is a paratrooper jumping out of an airplane. That's what the character did.
Look it up.
Look it up, Rob.
Dan
so
Cooper
here's an interesting
comics.
Just thought this today when Danny and I were watching the Josh Gates episode.
Mm-hmm.
Kenny was stationed in Alaska for 3 years working for that airline. I would think in Alaska, he may have had contact with a Canadian comic book. That would stand to reason that I would go, if you're in Canada, if you're in Alaska, you may have come across the Canadian comic book or two.
I wonder if Gina saw one.
What's that?
So I wonder if Gina saw one when she was on her vacation.
Oh, that'd be something if she came back and she's got herself one of them comic books.
Yeah, we're so banned in Canada now.
I'm Daryl, and this is my other brother.
That's okay, though. It's okay. It's just Canada.
Yeah, I love maple syrup.
So, Rob, did you find the comic book?
No.
Google Dan.
Dan,
Yeah,
is it just called Dan Cooper?
I bet
put
you if you
Dan Cooper comic book.
Yeah, I bet if you Google that, it pops right up. I bet. I'm looking too. I know what you're talking about, but I want to see if it comes up here. Dan Cooper comic. Yep, there it is. See, but they're showing different. Basically, the Dan Cooper stuff looks like the comics. It's
There he is.
all Air Force and stuff like that. So not everyone had the same cover on it, but there's the one.
I wonder if, because the one that they always show is the hardcover, which must be the compilation of all of them put in hardcover.
Yeah, this wasn't the one I remember from the show.
Here, I can do it. All right. Can you see it?
Well, every one of these comic books shows an
Whoa,
airplane
right there.
or
Whoa,
something
hey!
jumping.
Right here. That's right
There
here.
it is.
Yep, that's the one.
Yeah. Can you see a better picture of it though? Yeah, like
Right
that.
There you go.
That's the one that they referenced on the TV show as saying, this is Dan Cooper. And look at him. He's a paratrooper.
Well, every one of the covers has something to do with airplanes.
Correct. Yes.
Yep. So I thought it was a neat connection of Kenny being stationed in Alaska, and that's a Canadian comic book. I thought that was maybe a possible tie there. But in the Josh Gates episode, the reason why I really wanted to rewatch the first one is that they have a retired FBI agent who was also a paratrooper in the Army. He has a different drop zone that makes way too much fucking sense.
Yeah.
So the supposed jump zone, again, is just based off of the pilots. The only reason why they're searching where they were searching in the south part of Washington was because of the pilot saying that's when he jumped. That's the only thing they were going off of. But we know that from Seattle, they had to refuel in Reno, Nevada. So on the Josh Gates episode, the first one, they drive out there into Reno, and you see a much more favorable landing zone than in a forest in Washington. I mean, it's almost unbelievably perfect place for you to land. It's flat desert land with soft, cushiony bushes scattered across the ground, as opposed to pine trees. So in that episode, they have Josh jump out at 10,000 feet, land in that area, get picked up at the roadside by the retired FBI agent. And there's a lot of credence to that being a possibility. So the theory that
bushes are soft, cushiony bushes.
They actually said soft, cushiony bushes. No, it's no shit. Josh described them that way. It was either Josh or the FBI agent.
I trust Josh Gates with my life, so if he says they were soft and cushiony, I love that guy.
I would trust him over over one person. I might trust Josh, except for one person. I would trust Josh with anything.
You guys see my screen?
There you go.
This picture here is the picture that got me.
Yep.
We were watching that show. He comes walking in the door. He's got a big old sack here. This is just 4 months after the hijacking. There's a black briefcase, and he's wearing a black coat that you'd wear like a business suit. Put some glasses on him, and
a toupee,
a little toupee or whatever. But he had a hat on too, right?
No,
he did not have a hat.
No,
he just had the glasses. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean,
in that picture,
I was like,
that picture was hidden in a photo album behind another picture of his. Yes.
His family or his brother found it when they were going through the photos. It was stuck behind one. Like oh shit, we don't want everybody seeing this picture.
Yep.
And they actually thought that it might be his accomplice, quote unquote, that took the picture, because they didn't know where the picture came from. They said it was probably his accomplice. Huh?
Why would the accomplice take a picture?
It looks like it says in the little dialogue right there, we think he staged this and kept it as a memento.
Well, you hide it behind another photo. You don't want anybody seeing it. Right. It was a different time. You know what I mean? You have one photo in your album behind another one. It's not social media.
I don't know.
But
I just thought when I saw that picture, I thought to myself, amongst other reasons that they started to get me convinced after the first 10 minutes of watching the show, or probably wasn't even that long. Yeah, you start throwing some of the stuff that out there that they threw out at you. It was like, how can it not be this guy?
Well, and I'm really disappointed that he wasn't at least a suspect, that he wasn't considered, that he wasn't, drilled, or he wasn't, what would have his alibi been, that kind of thing. I'm still not sold that it's Kenny, but of any of the people that they've described,
it was funny because almost
that seems like it would be a logical fit versus a lot of the other ones that were really far-fetched. But
well, it seemed like a lot of them, the ones that resembled the picture,
they haven't been able to find anything. They weren't able to find parachutes. They weren't able to find a body. They weren't able to find the rest of the money. And I had even said, if he bought a house for cash, why didn't they find the money? Well, Rich made a really good point. He said, they didn't release those numbers right away. So in 1980, when it was dug up at the beach, they were able to identify that money and run the numbers and say, yeah, that was part of this money. But they never found any of the other money, which seems really strange to me. Even with the whole thought process of, oh, well, he had all this money and paid for cash for this house. None of that money ever showed up anywhere.
I have an idea for that, Jenny. So if you're Kenny and you deposit $186,000 into a bank account, banks are going to have those serial numbers. Somebody coming in and depositing a chunk of money like that, you may check. But let's say Kenny is smart. Kenny's already been planning this whole thing. If you're Dan Cooper or Kenny Christensen, you're very meticulous with your planning in this crime. We've seen it already. From the beginning, he seemed to have this thing planned out. Why would you jump off in the worst possible place? That doesn't make any damn sense.
Well, you also did mention that he grabbed the notes, but he left his cigarette butts.
Right. There was no DNA testing back then. Why would he think any differently or maybe he didn't smoke and he wanted them to think he was a smoker.
Ugh.
I mean, I don't know if that would have mattered back in 1971.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Yeah,
everybody smoked.
What they're thinking. Yeah.
Doctors were recommending cigarettes, for God's sakes. They were endorsing them. It was a crazy time, everybody.
It's interesting you bring that. I don't know where you're going at with your topic here that you just mentioned, but I didn't even think about that part of it. He deposited it in his bank account, so they had the money, unless he laundered it somehow.
Right, that's not a good idea either for somebody who planned out a crime perfectly, but still, where did he get the money from?
Yeah.
So because he was making about the average income at that time.
Yep.
So it wasn't.
Now, where do you get
great.
that kind of money?
He wasn't doing bad, but he's not going to get $180,000 out of nowhere.
No, he didn't. Yeah. No.
So let's say that Dan Cooper and Kenny are planning this out. Same person, by the way. So let's say that Kenny is planning this whole thing out. He's not going to jump in a bad spot, but he may want to give a slight diversion to make them think he jumped there. He gives a little bounce on some stairs. The pilots reported feeling a little jolt. That's the only thing that they went off of to get where he jumped. So if now he's going, we're going to refuel in Reno, I'm going to jump out before there in a nice smooth area, get into a car and split. Now here's the funny thing about Reno and refueling. Kenny says, oh, sorry, I keep using them interchangeably. I shouldn't do that. So Dan Cooper asks to go to Mexico from Seattle. And they tell him, we can't make it there because we have to refuel. Because he told them they have to fly below 10,000 feet and have the flaps at 15 degrees. And they said in that configuration, we can't make it to Mexico. We have to refuel in Reno. There's no way that the person who did that hijacking and asked for the plane to be in that configuration didn't know they couldn't make it to Mexico. There's no way. They knew they were going to refuel in Reno. This is all part of the plan. So now you jump out in Reno. Where's a great place to launder money that
Casino.
nobody would be
Casino.
hip to? The casinos.
I got it right.
Good job.
You go into Reno, you launder all that money, go down to Vegas, launder some more, and you split and you make your deposit. Now, Rob, this part might blow your mind.
Ooh.
So we
Keep
know
that
that
hat
they
on.
land in Reno. DB Cooper's not on the plane. They can't find him. They search the surrounding area from the airport. They can't find him. 5 days after the hijacking, a letter arrived at the Reno newspaper headquarters of the Nevada State Journal and the Afternoon Reno Evening Gazette. They received a letter with cutout letters out of a magazine or a newspaper that said, "Attention, thanks for the hospitality. Was in a rut. DB Cooper." Like, I don't know why anybody would think otherwise than DB Cooper didn't jump where they thought he did, went to casinos, laundered the shit out of that money. That money's gone. You go to a casino, we've all been there. There's no better place, especially in 1971, right after you do the hijacking. Nobody has that list of serial numbers yet. Not in 1971. Nobody's even going to know about this. Like, who's going to be looking for him in Reno? He pulls off his toupee, changes his clothes. Nobody's looking at that person. You're in a casino. You're spending money. That's what everybody does. It's the perfect place to do it. So my theory goes,
I like it.
How many days after was the letter sent? 5?
5.
5 days after. It was done in cutout letters.
Yep.
So this has already been all over the news.
Who was the letter
Yes.
sent to?
Okay, so anybody
The letter was
who
sent.
it, did they get any fingerprints off of it?
No, not that they said. And actually, I don't know how much of it was on the news. I misunderstood your question. I thought you were saying the newspapers put it out. They did. But you mean like nationally?
Yeah, where you could
That
get
I'm not
them-
sure of. They never really touched on any of that, of how big of a story this was, nationally, for somebody to have known about it. I know where you're going with that anybody could have sent that letter in, but
Right,
why
it's
would they
also
send it?
important to get with all the fakes and the phonies and the loonies. You should have been able to lift fingerprints off of it. And I would make some kind of assumption that career criminals, or even, I don't know, I'm not a military person. Do they fingerprint you in the military so they can identify you?
I'm sure they do.
Right.
Just the question I have.
I'm sure
They
do.
never, from the understanding that I have, they never tested any of that stuff.
And who did that letter go to, Pete?
Oh.
We're having technical difficulties.
He's yelling at the
stand by.
dogs.
Please stand by. Please stand by.
Yeah,
Oh, he's
I was
back.
yelling at Betty. She's barking about something.
God damn it.
Oh, so they sent it they sent the letter to 2 newspapers,
Okay.
to 2 separate newspapers in Nevada is who it was sent to. It was
Please tell me one was Reno and one was Las Vegas.
the
That would
Nevada
even make your
State
theory
Journal. No, there wasn't one for Vegas, but he had to have gone to Vegas too. I mean, why not? I would have. He's on top of the world. He jumped out of an airplane. He's got a ton of cash. It's
Half of
1971.
a ton of cash.
Half of a ton.
Yeah. Well, he only lost one bundle. It was just one bundle that he lost on that beach.
Did he lose it or did he plant it?
It's a good question. Those newspapers were the Nevada State Journal and the Afternoon Reno Evening Gazette. Received that letter. Now, Rob, you make a good point that somebody could have heard that and sent the letter. But if they were doing news coverage a few days later, because the letter also has to travel to get to the place, they were all talking about Washington as where he jumped. So I don't know why anybody who would have been listening to the news would have thought Reno, because nobody ever mentioned Reno until recently. The assumption was always said he jumped over Washington State.
Yeah,
So-
and when anybody brought up a different theory back then, they went, no, that's not.
Yeah, they
where he
went
jumped.
no.
It's
Yep.
like all of a sudden they knew where he jumped, but they know nothing
Yeah.
else about the case.
Yep.
You can be sure about, they got 10 items. They're sure about one of them. So right away, that's what we go with. Let's not worry about looking at the other 9 again.
Yep. That's it. That's it exactly. I mean,
amazing to me.
To me, you take Kenny and you have all of these circumstantial things that fit great. But I think when you connect that with the jump point being in Reno, laundering the money, then going back, depositing that money, he used cash for his house, gave cash to a friend. Again, you're just dispersing more of this money and the stuff. I mean, stuff's already been laundered and he's giving that stuff away too. And that, like, it's too much like right. And I feel like that makes the most sense out of the whole thing. Now, why the FBI isn't hip to that, and either they know way more than they're telling us, but they closed the case. They seem like you'd want to figure this one out because you got a little bit of egg on your face with this, or it was an inside job, and that's the whole thing why we never found anything out. But that's a whole nother thing.
Would they not have used trackers back then?
No, because that's why they did the serial numbers and they did the photocopy transfer screening thing to make all the copies of the numbers. Was their way to track it, was through the money.
Well, I meant like
there was no radio transponder or anything like that they could do.
Or they didn't do.
Or they didn't. If there was, they didn't do it.
Maybe they found him and the FBI just like, hey, let's keep this money and wash our hands of the whole thing.
It's another good theory.
That's another good theory.
I mean, nobody knows.
That's another good theory.
It's like I said, you can go down this rabbit hole for, I think, a long time. You could pick any of the hundreds of suspects and you could probably sit and talk about it for hours and come up with pros and cons, just like all these other ones. But I think there's only a couple that make sense, but they're only the couple of ones that we've heard about where someone tried to make them make sense to us, you know?
Right.
I mean, I'm sure there's other ones out there that have a similar story to Kenny here, but man, do the facts just, or the circumstantial evidence, I should say, just piles up against this guy, even to the point where his family and friends think he was DB Cooper. They were point blank asked. His brother and his supposedly best friend were asked point blank, and they both said yes, that they would think he was. They didn't know that for sure because he never told them that, but their gut feelings were, because of everything else, the money, just the way he was acting before and after that happened, that they were pretty sure that he was him. You know, he's the guy. But
well, and I think that there's a want for him to have survived. I think that, I mean, I know one of the shows talked about a whole town that like dedicates, a celebration every year for DB Cooper. And I think that there's just this want. People want to have that he survived and he was able to spend all that money. And I really do think that Kenny is a very interesting possibility, but I'm not sold on that it's him. He very well could have died. Odds weren't really good. The fact that they couldn't find anything is a mystery, and people love a mystery. So I do wish that he would have been a suspect and they would have been able to do some digging on him, but I'm still not sold that that's him.
Sorry to be wrong, but moving on.
I mean, you make a good point, Rich. It's just that there's so many of the like, when you get the suspect laid out for you and you get it broken down that way, it is very convincing. Sure, I always try to take all the pieces, with all those different shows that talk about, DB Cooper or something like that. I always try to find connecting points between pieces of the stories or pieces of the evidence that kind of fit together and look at it that way. So with this, you kind of look at that flight plan and I go, it's a wild story that all of the information is just based off of witnesses. That's it. And we know witnesses aren't always right, but all of the whole place where they're searching is because pilots said that had to be it. That's really vague to go off of. It doesn't mean it's not correct, but it makes more sense that maybe there was a different drop zone, and that Reno one makes a lot of sense. So I think that part of the mystery, that makes a lot of sense. Now getting into the suspects, Kenny just makes so much sense because of that money. Like, where did that money come from? You didn't have any other way to accumulate that much wealth.
Yeah, and let me point out too that let's not forget the airline got most of their money back when they filed their insurance claim. Okay,
That's
out
true.
of the 200,000, they got like $180,000 back.
Right.
So, I know you want to say it's a victimless crime or whatever, but I like you said, I think that the government has egg on its face,
Yep.
To this day about it. And I think more of the hype and everything is based on, they just want to catch the guy,
I think people just want answers to that to kind of go, that's why I said it reminds me so much of the secret treasure hunt. As part of it is just going, it's been so long now that this has been unsolved, and it has all the makings of a great mystery because you have this larger than life folk hero that he's turned into. This guy's dressed in glasses like a man in black, who hijacks a plane with a bomb. Was the bomb even real? Was it fake? He jumps off the back stairs with $200,000 and is never caught. Like, it has everything that people want in a great story. And I think people just want the end of that. We want to know who this person is who accomplished this. I mean, it's kind of amazing that it's such a big part of pop culture. I mean, anybody who saw Without a Paddle, it's great that, that's about DB Cooper.
I'm gonna have to watch that again.
Yeah, we just watched it recently, and it's it's a lot of fun. It's
one of those. Is the late great Burt Reynolds in that one?
Yes, he is.
I thought he was.
Yes, he is.
I thought the Bandit was in there.
Oh, he was.
I'm gonna have to watch that again.
That one. Yeah.
So he must have taken that quote unquote bomb with him when he jumped out of the plane, huh?
They said they couldn't find it afterwards, so that's what they're assuming. Yeah.
In that the briefcase, they never found the briefcase that he had that he opened, and that's why that picture of Kenny was so interesting, because he's holding a case like that.
Yeah, and the brother actually had it still and gave it to those investigators with all that stuff in there, and it was what even a bigger punch in the face to the airline. The bag on it was issued by Northwest Orient. It had a tag on it. It was actually his work briefcase. So, let's get your ransom money, put it right here in this briefcase that you guys gave me. Yeah.
I mean, it feels too much like right. Oh,
I know. You're right, and it does sound too much like right, and we all realize we're coming up with theories, and it's all of our own opinions, and nobody knows anywhere. There's nobody that knows except for one person, and he's probably not with us anymore anyway, age wise. So it doesn't matter whether we're right or wrong what we say. I mean, it's just like you said, it's an interesting story, and boy, it sure would be nice to know who it was, though.
It's an interesting story. It's a rabbit hole that I know I'm just going to keep going down. Anytime there's new documentaries out about it or old ones that I find, I always have to watch it, just because it's so damn interesting to try to figure out how this person pulled it off. I guess let's go around the horn and I want to know, simple kind of, do you guys think he died or he got away? Is kind of the way that I'm looking. Like that's the thing that I personally, I think he got away. I don't think he died. I think whoever pulled this off planned meticulously, knew what they were doing, and went home, had that money, and just lived their life. Because it almost seemed like I don't want to say a bucket list thing, but it almost seemed like just kind of a spitting in the face of maybe a possible employer, of, you've dicked me around this much and now I'm just going to get something back. And I don't think that person was interested in being famous or living fancy and flashy after the fact. I think they got away and they went about the rest of their days just doing whatever they do. But I think that he got away. Rich, how about you?
I have always thought from day one that he got away. Maybe it's not knowing a lot of the information we know today, but just hearing it when you're growing up and stuff like that. I think you're modern day Robin Hood thing. It's like, oh man, this guy did that. He got away with it. Now with everything we know and all the forensics and all the TV shows and all this, I mean, obviously we all know the story. Yeah, I think he, after visualizing it and actually seeing other people do it, I think he probably got away with it. And they never found a body anywhere. I mean,
that we know of.
You see, and that is interesting too, because if you say, well, he landed right down there in that forest down there, he's got to be dead. Well, we didn't find him. Well, we didn't find the body. Well, he could have landed in the water. Well, wait a minute, time out. You're hedging your whole case on he jumped right here and he fell into the trees. Well, all of a sudden you're gonna just throw out, well, maybe he's in the water, maybe he fell in the water somewhere. So I mean, there's different theories, along with the money they found in 1980, right by the river. How did he get there? Oh, maybe that's where he landed, in the river, and they went down different, avenues to explain how that's not possible with the evidence. And, I think he got away with it. I mean, I hope he did. I mean, until I hear evidence otherwise, that's what I'm going to go with.
Jenny, how about you?
I think it's a damn shame that they didn't interview Kenny. That's what I think.
Well,
I actually don't think he made it, but I think it's a fantastic story. And, my mind tells me that they could have easily interviewed Kenny and found a reason why it wasn't even possible. He didn't actually tell anybody in his family that he was D.B. Cooper. Even when he died, there's no reason why he couldn't say it at that point to his brother. But I mean, I would like to believe that he made it. And I think that a lot of people, they are very interested in the unsolved mystery part of it.
Right.
But I haven't seen the most compelling evidence, I think, is with with Kenny. I think his story really aligns well with could be him, but I'm not convinced that it's him. I still think that he didn't make it.
All right, Rob, I'm dying to know what you think.
Well, I mean, I just took in a lot of information, because in the little bit of research I did, pretty much it explained he's dead. The weather and the conditions, and he could have been blown all over the place, and they never found anything.
It's true.
Now, if they were able to identify that the money that was found on the beach was from that, how were they never able to trace any of the other money? At the same time, I mean, if you knew to fly at this altitude with the flaps at this degree, you knew something.
Right.
Aerodynamics and parachuting or flying or whatever. He didn't just pull that out of his butt, as somebody just trying to stick it to his employer. So I guess I could go either way. It's interesting, but I think I can see it go either way. There's not enough evidence presented to me, and I need to look at it for a while. So this is where I am at. I'm indecisive about this situation.
Fair enough.
I feel like Rob came a little way from the beginning of the episode to now. I feel like you moved a little bit.
Well, because I also think that, to me, back in those days, I was the transponder. I was going to mention that. I don't know. I just seen a movie and it was fictional, and I'm not sure what year it took place, but they used one and some money. So that's why I brought that up, and I was curious to know if they did that. And the other, what if the FBI did find his body and said, that's a lot of money? We are the FBI, and we can make this go our way. And that's why it's so wonky.
That's possible.
That's a possibility.
It was easier to be a crooked cop back then I'm sure
That's
it's
true.
really easy to be a crooked FBI agent back then.
That's a good point. I honestly never thought of that angle before. That
What if
you don't
you
know.
what
you
if
don't know
you
any
and
of
your
that stuff.
partner came across this body and nobody was there and there was a case of money? Would you consider it even for a second?
No, I'm too honest.
Well, that's where we part company then. Because
Right.
I would take that sucker in a
I'm
heartbeat.
going.
I'm with you. I wouldn't be able to take the money, but I
I would
also
be
think
too.
if
I would
Kenny
be too
was,
nervous that I would get caught.
I
Yeah,
would
but
think if Kenny was as brilliant as as the story makes him out to be, he would not be making that kind of money working for an airline. He could do a lot better for himself.
That's a possibility. That's an interesting way of looking at the mastermind. Or did he just really know a lot about this specific thing that he could do? You know, he wasn't a jack of all trades, but whoever pulled this off knew enough about what they needed to know. Like, you know, a master of, how's that old saying go? You're a jack of all trades, but
Master of none.
there you go.
well,
Yeah,
you can learn a lot from comic books too. So, he might have got all he needed to from that comic book and taught him everything he needed. Thank you for laughing, Jenny.
Is there a button on here where you can kick people off? Like the people that are wrong, we'll just kick them out.
What are you suggesting?
No,
Well,
you know how like
Rob,
on
you
the
had-
Gong Show.
Well, I would have been gone.
Gong.
You were gonna gong me?
No, I was actually that came out later than I wanted to come out. It was actually going to be after our survey, and I was going to say, "Can we just kick out the people that aren't right? We'll just kick them out right now." It just didn't fall in the right place, so I would never boot anybody. I'm just messing around.
Wow.
Rob,
were
you
gonna gong me.
Makes for good
you
ratings.
have to admit
Got to have some drama somewhere.
you have to admit that the comic book and him using the alias Dan Cooper can't be a coincidence.
No, that's actually pretty interesting. I mean, that's very
Yeah.
interesting.
Right.
For the most, like I said, most of the articles were very cut and dry and didn't go into any kind of conspiracy. So that was the first I seen of that. But that's, yeah.
I'd have to look and see if there's is there really anything out there on this as a conspiracy thing where people have other backdoor, reasons as to why someone would.
Well, isn't every kind of theory that we come up without the facts a conspiracy theory of like what happened to him?
I don't know.
Maybe he was abducted by aliens on his way down.
There usually has to be a cover up, though, right?
Another dimension.
Exactly. Right. I think if we went at this episode from that angle of that we were saying there was something that happened and another agency took them out, or that I think we're going down the conspiracy things. If or aliens were behind it, like you said, I think then we're conspiracying it. I think.
Is there a conspiracy theory surrounding the JFK assassination?
Oh.
Now there's no aliens involved there.
No, but I think doesn't a conspiracy just it's the cover-up part of the story that becomes the conspiracy. There's people at a higher level that have masterminded the whole thing.
Like the FBI agents who have that money.
Right, or the whole thing was an FBI operation at the time to see is something like this possible, and they said, hey,
good call.
You pull this off, you get to keep the money. If you live, go ahead, you get to keep the cash. Let's see.
We won't chase you. We'll close the case. We won't even allow you to be a suspect.
Yeah. That would be a conspiracy.
We'll say you're too tall.
Huh.
Right, yeah.
Right.
You're 2 inches too short.
Yeah, I mean, some of those answers they have are just amazing to me. I just don't get it. But whatever.
I mean, it's usually the easiest answer, or the most obvious is usually the one that would say, well, he's probably dead, or he got away, and there was just a lot of incompetence that got in the way. It was 1971. Things may not have been running like a finely tuned machine. I mean, to me, I could definitely see there just being incompetence along the way from law enforcement, and at a certain point, yeah, you look like the idiots that didn't figure it out and just goes away. I mean, I could see that.
Well, thanks for stopping by. Hope everyone had a good time.
Well, join us again next week where we'll have Albert Einstein.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
Jack Hanna.
Well, apparently Albert Einstein died.
Jack Hanna, he's going to bring his flying squirrel.
It's going to come through all of our little windows.
That'd be sweet.
Yeah, I think that probably wraps us up. That was a good conversation. I'm glad that seems like Rob came a little bit and opened up a little bit to it, which I think is one of the things we're after. Let's see if we can take some known conceptions of things and maybe open some different ideas. And I feel like maybe we did that this episode.
Maybe, I mean, there's got to be other people out there that never heard of this guy, because I never heard of this guy until I watched that episode. So I mean, it'd be nice to get some other people's ideas on that. Maybe we can post the address for that.
Yeah,
when we do the episode, so that people want to go back and want to watch that episode, they can do that. So
yeah, I think that Brad Meltzer episode gives a pretty good overview of the whole thing, plus with getting some information into Kenny being a possible suspect.
Yeah, I got a question for you guys. What is connectedrealm@gmail.com?
The email.
That's where you send your requests to TRPD for any investigations.
Yes, exactly. That is what it is.
Yes.
Thank you for bringing that up, Mr.
I just want everyone to remember that the Realm is now doing investigations for any paranormal activity or cryptids or aliens or spaceships or whatever. Reach out to us. DB Cooper, reach out to us.
We're going to Reno.
connectedrealm@gmail.com. That's TRPD, the Realm Paranormal Detectives. So if you need anything, reach out to us. And I think we should all say something in regards to Gina. Gina, we missed you. Wish you would have been here. I know that you were enjoying your little vacation, so hope you had fun.
Yeah, I really was hoping Gina was going to be able to make it on this episode. I really wanted to hear what she thought.
Yeah, it would have been fun to have her perspective on this one. I think she definitely would have been able to add to the discussion, but I'm glad she had a good vacation.
Yeah, I agree.
Right.
All right, guys. Anything else? Otherwise, I think that's it for today.
Where can everybody find us, Rich?
Right here. Oh, Connected Realm.
Same bat time, same bat channel.
Connected Realm.
Spotify.
At gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook. We have the YouTube channel that you can watch this episode on. Otherwise, you can get us on any place where you get your podcasts. Google, Spotify, Apple, Amazon. Yep. Otherwise, if you go onto our Facebook page and you click on the link to the episode, it'll take you right to your preferred listening platform, I'm sure. So, for everyone here at the Realm, I'm Rich, and until next week, have a good one. Bye.
All right. See you, everybody.